Thank you for joining us today. My name is Elizaga, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anna. For those of us that are new, welcome. Our monthly meetup is here to serve the needs of the growing product operations community. We connect our network by putting on informative meetups on the newest topics in the world of product and product operations. We provide networking opportunities to meet more like-minded folks. We also host a virtual space on Slack to ask questions and tap into the communal wisdom. So if you're not there yet, please join us today. Anna will be dropping a link in the chat for you to do so. What I love the most about this community is how global we are and how easy it is to connect with people across the world in these events. So do let us know where you're joining from today. Maybe you can type it in the chat. And I always love to see where people are. While we are all saying hello, I just want to make a few notes about today's session. So as always, this session is being recorded and will be shared later. Our format for today's session will be a panel discussion followed by Q&A. So if you have questions at any point during our meetup today, don't feel shy. Please type them into the chat, and we'll either take them live if it's appropriate, or right after the panel discussion, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session. And because of the number of participants, I do want to ask that you make sure to keep your mic muted. And great, let's see in the chat. We've got, Jakarta, San Francisco, and a lot of London. All right, so we're all over again. Toronto, Canada. Great. Jacksonville, Florida. Amazing. Hello from Portugal, as always. Awesome. Okay, so we've got an amazing session lined up today, and it would not be possible without Dragon Boat. Dragon Boat helps entire product teams prioritize and deliver impact across their portfolio of products, provides a single platform to manage your entire product operating model. So do check it out at dragonboat.io/product-ops, and Anna will drop that link in the chat for you to do that. So today we're here to talk about product operations and how it drives revenue. And our panel of experts are going to talk during the session that will explore how product operations does that by focusing on 3 critical aspects. So first is the importance of good strategy, then the power of innovation and experimentation, and finally, the benefits of GTM focus and cross-functional collaboration. Our panel today will be led by Lindsey Shea. Lindsey is an experienced strategic planner. She's a team leader. She's an operational mastermind, and she's championed product and product operations at Twilio, Rapid, Foursquare. She transforms teams and drives product success. So welcome, Lindsey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I love seeing some familiar names in the chat. I see Jeff. I see my old boss Hudak in there. Gabby. I think many of you guys know Gabby. She's got quite the voice in the industry nowadays. I'm happy to join you. I love what I do, and I love having opinions and talking about what I do. So this is the perfect forum for me. I would like to think that the panel feels very similar, and that's why they're here today. We are excited for a conversation. So as Alyssa said, we have our introductions, we have our discussion, but we do want to save some time for Q&A. So keep that in mind as we're speaking, what questions you guys have. I'd like to go around the room just to introduce our panelists. Just to go left to right here, let's start with Alex. Alex, tell us about yourself.
Right on. Thanks, Lindsey. Good to be here. Hi, everyone. My name's Alex Nichols. I'm based in the Seattle area here in the US. I'm currently the Director of Product Ops at Eventbrite. I've been there for about 6 months or so. And before that, spent a number of years at Microsoft and building out the product ops function at GitHub. I've really enjoyed product ops over the years and stayed in it. Really because of this craft and discipline of product management, kind of the systems that support it and help scale it, and also things like what goes into a successful product launch to get things into market.
Oh, Dave.
Thanks. Dave Dunning. I'm in Chicago adjacent. I work at CDK Global as Senior Director of Product Strategy and Operations. Fell into this role about a year and a half ago, figuring out what product ops was and think I got my feet underneath me now, running with it, and really enjoyed a lot of what Alex said and kind of bringing products to market, kind of seeing this things through the whole PDLC, seeing the ideation all the way through to we're here to talk about today and growing revenue and the organization.
Thanks, Dave. Miguel.
Thanks, Lindsay, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Hey, everyone. My name is Miguel. I'm based in the SF Bay Area. I graduated from the Haas School of UC Berkeley, and I have over 7 years of work experience. My career in product operations started at Twilio, where I worked in cloud financial operations. Then I moved into a chief of staff role where I helped run our platform engineering org and help manage strategic programs. After that, I served as a product operations manager at Rapid, where I helped manage a 100-person R&D team, where I helped lead our intake product testing and release management processes. I'm currently working at Asana in product operations for our data org in an embedded capacity, where I still work on a lot of internal cross-functional initiatives and related to outcomes, operational efficiency, and data enablement. I would say outside of work, I'm a total gym rat. I'm super into bodybuilding and distance running. And I've also picked up a recent hobby for grilling meats, and I'm super into cars. So I'm really excited to get to know everyone and share a little bit more about my experiences today.
I love the personal notes. It's summer here in Bend, Oregon. So I might be heading out to mountain bike at the park that just opened today at Bachelor. So just a little bit of things that I like to do sprinkled in there too. Cool. One thing I do want to call out before we get started, because I do think it's an important perspective to consider, is notice the companies that all of our panelists are at. Do keep in mind the scale. Listen to, their team structure and how they've developed that against the scale, because that is definitely a bias that we all carry in our responses as well. So, think about where you're at and what company stage you're at and translate what the most stage appropriate items are. If I had to pick one learning from my product operations experience, is that people are the biggest piece of all of this. And that's totally driven by company scale and culture and influence. So before we get into the questions, I actually have the question for you guys. I did create a little Slido today for a fun little word cloud. I'm sure we're all familiar with this. So I've shared my screen here. Do a little scan of the QR code or do our Slido number and tell us what you think drives revenue from the product operations perspective. And hopefully it works. But I guess we'll see. If someone submits and it doesn't show up, let us know. Ooh, there we go. Nice. Predictability, that's a good one. Time to revenue. Amazing. Ooh, I was going to say no repeats yet. Wow. Okay, great. All right, we'll give one more minute here. Cost reduction. It's a good thing. There certainly are those levers, right? Decrease cost, increase revenue. Awesome. Well, a lot of these things we're going to cover today. As Alyssa shared on the screen, we've got some good topics, the importance of good strategy, innovation, experimentation, and also the collaboration arm of product operations. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's go ahead and kick off our panel. So let's start with Dave to kick us off with this question. How can product operations help align the product strategy with the overall business objectives to maximize revenue potential? Hitting on this alignment piece here.
Yeah, I appreciate that, since I think I was one of the ones that put alignment in there, so that
Yeah.
that helps. I think our biggest, from our org's perspective, I think what similar to what a lot of companies are doing today, right? We're product led, and that means different things across different organizations. But for us, that really means ownership of revenue growth and where we're going with it. Right, we're not the sales team and not out generating revenue, but we own the strategy around creating that revenue. And so as we get together, whether it's on one PI or it's one sprint or one half of the year, 1 year, or even like a 3-year plan, it's gaining that alignment across the organization to say like, hey, this is where we see going, right? We're launching this new feature that we think over the next year will generate 100 new licenses that we can then launch a second feature on top of that can also expand this and kind of grow it, and creating that vision that gets the company all aligned and moving the same way. So there's really fewer surprises across the organization of, hey, we know what we're doing today. We know we're doing on today plus 90 and today plus 300. And we can kind of all plan to that same end goal that we think that this is a for our, a $10 million opportunity that we can go get.
Alex, Miguel, anything to add?
The other thing I wanted to add, and I think this is like something that we all already know as product operations professionals, but like product, we are the bridge between our R&D teams and our customers. And the way we do it as product operations professionals is basically by providing clarity throughout the organization on our processes, tools, systems, data, et cetera. There's also an extra component here that I want to think about and kind of highlight, but it's not just like setting up the processes and tools, but also setting and choosing like the right prioritization framework. I've seen it at different companies where there's like this culture of like a yes and, okay, we'll do this, and this is also important, but something to also like to deep dive on and maybe to pay attention to is just helping to enable the organization to do less things very well rather than doing many things not as well. So it's just something else to consider within the product operations space.
Yeah, I guess the thing that comes to mind for me here is I really like what you're saying, Dave, about the planning activities. I think that's super important. That's whether you have a larger annual planning cycle, quarterly, or more ad hoc, but also those ongoing ceremonies. So one of the things that in a few months here at Eventbrite that been working with my team on is these sort of monthly or weekly check-ins within for a product leader and their teams, or with up to executive staff, that they have those sort of weekly, monthly places where both the tactics on the product roadmap, but also tying into the metrics, those stay front and center on a regular basis, plus including that bridge over, like you were saying, Miguel, to those cross-functional partners. So it's not just a sort of product silo. We're involving engineering, involving product marketing, so that we're all sort of speaking from the same playbook here.
Yeah, there's kind of two things there, right? The words that I found myself using most recently are, you have a strategic framework and then you have an operating framework. That strategic framework is sort of the ladder in which you think about focus, prioritization. So that is things like, it doesn't really matter what it is, right? OKRs, let's just throw it out. Everybody loves those. That is the structure that allows people to think in a particular way. The operating framework, as Alex points out, is the tighter cycles that allow us to pivot, which to me is so essential, right? In order to we can make decisions every quarter, every year. We get new information constantly.
That's why I laugh.
Yeah. One thing I really want to dive into is, we have this strategic framework, but Miguel brought up this focus idea, which to me kind of speaks to trade-off in a way, right? In making these right calls. How can product operations ensure that the product strategy remains focused on revenue growth without compromising other important aspects like quality and user experience? And you're welcome, Jason, for this question. Who wants to kick us off?
I can take it. Yeah, I think this one speaks to me in some of the experience I had at GitHub, where really iterative releasing was a big deal, and sort of progressing along phases. So one of the things that we really paid attention to in product ops and help work with the product managers on is what is sort of appropriate to release your product change as. Is it a private beta, progress into a public beta, to general availability? And so creating a sort of default path there, so that we sort of have the right level of confidence and build that confidence along the way, rather than just shipping everything out to all customers all the time. Taking that slightly cautious, but gives that payback in terms of, hey, with this group of customers, we see a pretty big, uptick in the metrics that we were watching, and we didn't see any kind of negative hit to some of our secondary metrics or things like quality or UX concerns. So that kind of getting that progression, helping coach and sort of counsel to what's appropriate for which particular product change, that's been a big for us.
Nice.
I have a point of view here as well. So I've been in different companies where a lot of feature work was primarily the priority. And I've also worked in organizations where there was more of like a balance between bugs and feature requests. And just thinking about my experiences as a whole, when I think of product operations, again, we're going back to the concept that our job is to bring visibility to the organization. And part of that is also monitoring the balance of new feature work and bugs. Being able to track that across the organization and being able to flag whether or not, hey, we have the wrong balance of features and bugs, or we may have a lot of bugs that, or have not been addressed that we probably need to pay attention towards since our customers are complaining. I think also a component of this results in the type of product strategy or the product vision that the product leader sets. And that also has to be clear throughout the organization. I think for the organization to understand the right balance of feature work and bugs, it also has to come from the top. So that's kind of like my perspective from that.
Yeah, I piggyback on that a little bit. I completely agree. Like it's got to be really a top-down approach, and I think it's for our organization, we're constantly fighting that. And probably no different than most organizations, but constantly fighting that new feature request versus bug versus we then have a tech debt that we have to pay at some point, right? And as we've been around, how do you balance that through and then look at revenue growth? And I think the profile of the organization is really what drives this a lot. We've in the almost 4 years I've been at CDK, we've been a public company, we've been a private company, and how do those drive your decision making from the top down to then where we use that word again, where we can then push that alignment throughout the organization to say like, hey, this is the focus is driving bug reduction so we can fix tech stats so that we can create new feature new iterative releases that drive revenue growth across.
Yeah, I think embedded in all of this is time. We had time to revenue in our word bubble. You could say time to market, but our question was really about like some sacrifices that may come through and when you don't make sacrifices and at what point you don't. So Alex points out, right, the balance. This is all about balance. We could look at it from the strategic perspective of here's where we want to be as a company in the next year, which means we should balance our work like this. And as product operations people, we then operate that, right? So we bring that visibility in. On Alex's point, I love the release stage call out because that to me is a very true day-to-day work definition for how we balance this over time and empowers the team to do that through an operating technique. And that is balancing time with value. They're not exchanged all the time. Speed does not always equal value. Value can be quality. Value can be experience. So we have to think about those measures as we release on time, right? Time does not always equal better. We do
I'd like to also
go ahead, Miguel.
I'd also like to say that like a guiding principle that I think about whenever I'm developing these processes is at the end of the day, the product manager is ultimately responsible and accountable. And as such, you must empower them to autonomously make decisions. It can't be just like a process that they follow. And because the process says that's the right thing, that's necessarily what they have to do. They have to be empowered to also make the right decisions. So when you're designing your framework around that, be sure to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Just to tag on to Maggie's point in the chat of tech debt being ignored and sabotaging revenue growth, that is so true to the balance, right? Like if you are not understanding where your tech debt rate is, not that you need to have an actual number measure, you can feel some of that, subjectively, you can see where teams are distracted. There's also some things in here of like, how the team is functioning. Are they efficient? Are they working in a culture that allows them to do what they need to do to drive these outcomes as well, per Miguel's point, right? To have the empowered team means that they're capable of making decisions rather than, you know, everything kind of coming up to the top. So there's a balance of top down and up.
Yeah, I would piggyback on that tech debt. You know, ignoring it, I think then creates that it creates questions around that shiny new feature. Is it really nice on the outside, and then what does it look like inside, where you're setting yourself up for just a disaster in a short amount of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, I'm going to stay on this topic for just one more question. Is there a risk that the overemphasis on short-term revenue growth and product operations can lead to that compromised quality and unethical practice? So just digging a little deeper on, you know, speed versus quality. What is the risk of that?
I think you're always going to, I think that's a constant balance, right? Is there some equation that says like, hey, what is your risk profile against that speed? And your cost, and maybe more importantly, what's your customer's risk profile against that, because I think that's where we lean on other parts of the organization to say like, hey, we think we can come to the table with this in 1 month versus 6. Here's the result. What are you hearing that you feel the customer, and taking that input in to kind of maximize the output and say maybe 1 month's not the answer, 6 may not be either, but 3 is, or finding out what that balance is.
Absolutely. Alex, Miguel.
Yeah, so just kind of like my point of view on this. When I think of short term, I think of anything that's under a year. And just from my experience in product operations, depending on the scale, I know for smaller companies, they probably don't have this, but they don't really have like a longer range strategic planning cycle. So inherently, in my perspective, like at least early on in the product operations lifecycle for these companies, a lot of the stuff that we're working on is either short to medium term, which is like within the year or a little bit past the year. There is an opportunity though at this stage to create spaces for longer term discussions. And that's kind of like when we talk about in product operations, setting up like our strategic discussions for MBR, QBR, or our roadmap reviews, or implementation of like an LRP process. These are all the things that we have to think about in addition to like a short term, like in-year road mapping, every quarter road mapping cycles, to just make sure that our product strategy is moving forward over the next X years.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that, and what comes to mind here is this kind of thought of local optimization from certain teams, because often product management teams are sort of sliced into different parts of the product space or the feature set, what have you, and sort of this drive to, hey, if I can just get some more adoption of my feature that translates into some metric growth that I want to see on revenue, great, but you know, often there's this gap in seeing the bigger picture, because our customers and users experience it from end to end. So I've seen that come into play. I've seen it sort of go poorly, where we have to sort of roll things back or water it down. So I think what comes to mind there is this sort of cross, enabling these sort of cross product team visibility opportunities, where others from across, other product managers or others from the team can weigh in on a particular change in one part of the product, where it might have these ripple effects down the line, and ask the questions. Could be lightweight enough to ask those questions, and again find that sort of balance of thinking about the customer's experience overall or the long range impact.
Yeah, we're definitely digging into what are the components of a strong product strategy in a way, right? Because you have, to Dave's point, you have a customer risk profile, which you could say is a user or an account. That user experience is relevant, and how much they are willing to wait is total factor. But then you layer on market risk profile, right? Entering maybe with something that is less mature might be a risk to your brand. How do you figure out what the appropriate assessment of that is? When you look at your product portfolio holistically, you have a unified value of that, which you can have all these releases on a smaller level, but still you have an experience to manage, for Alex's point, which really builds on the bigger picture product strategy. One thing that was not mentioned, and I'll transition into the next thing that I think is an important piece of this, is we talked about an operating framework and like pivoting and doing things. There is the cadences that allow us to talk about it, but product managers and product teams have hypotheses that they validate and invalidate over time. So they were able to pivot this strategy with the information that we need, which is really experimentation. So with that transition, how can product operations balance the need for innovation and experimentation with the goal of driving revenue growth?
Yeah, I think briefly here is I have sort of seen a few different ways of, sometimes where I've seen teams that are split out and sort of dedicated into this kind of earlier in the pipeline, sort of, hey, let's take more speculative bets and kind of develop those, throw the ones that don't work away. And then if they are successful, sort of graduate into the mainline sort of product portfolio. Other times I've seen it where the sort of discipline from the product, the sort of leadership within the product teams to encourage that kind of portfolio approach, that we're allocating, some big rocks, some medium rocks, some small rocks, that kind of approach, or these kind of multi-horizon sort of range of bets that we want to place to help again, like keep that mix of with teams so that they don't get too far in one way or the other, where we're not just working on, fulfilling customer requests at the end of the day, where we're also doing things that are trying to anticipate what they're going to need in the future.
Is there, Alex, just to dig into that one a little bit, you've seen both. In what instances is one more successful than another?
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's probably the latter, where we sort of take some discipline and really help every team have some element of this. I've seen some of the, hey, we'll have a incubation team or an innovation type team, right? But of course, the challenge is really in that, how does it cross over? And that's often really difficult to do that well, right? Because it's often a different set of engineers that are working on it. And maybe it's kind of lost that spark, that agility that it had when it first sort of came to be, right? So I think that's maybe riskier. It could work. So yeah, I've sort of seen it more reliably get pulled off by just having that discipline within kind of each team to help really like product managers do that kind of job, that more well-rounded, more holistic job that thinks about current, future, next, all parts of it.
I think that's a great example of where product operations at an organization can make that difference, right? Because teams operating on their own and autonomously, as Miguel described, with a perspective of innovation and experimentation being important, product operations can enable that at a larger organization. Versus, to me, the need for an incubation team is, oh, we're not doing that well holistically, I need to dedicate it, right? It's almost like, to me, an indicator, the symptom of something else. Anywho, Dave, Miguel, anything to add here?
I'll let you go first, Dave. I got opinions.
Yeah, I think, to go back to the original question, I think it's really about how revenue growth's decided. We're a top-down organization, so our exec team will come down to the strategy org, myself and a couple of my peers, and say, hey, we've got to generate $30 million in new revenue this year. And then it's about going to the products and saying, okay, what incubation ideas do you have that can do this, or where are we getting revenue? Revenue is a really simple equation. It's price and quantity. Are you getting more users? Are you charging more? Or what? Like, where are we going? And so how do we back into that and create that alignment to, again, that word right throughout the organization that says, hey, this is our strategy to drive to this number. And then I've worked in other organizations where it's all bottoms up. And hey, we think we can get $4 million more this year. How do we use those ideas to go get it and creating that same? So
kind of built within the strategic framework.
Yep.
Nice. We're definitely riding the lines between opinions here, right? Of the strategic framework driving and the operating framework driving. It's a constant, what is right for the group, what's needed. Totally. Miguel.
Cool. I think I agree with all of you. It depends on the flavor of the company at the end of the day. But I can give you an example of how we're doing it at scale at Asana. So essentially, the experimentation processes are actually built into our product process, our PDLC. And essentially, what we do here at Asana is we provide like a clear experimentation framework and also provide like an experiment repository to share our findings. So we can empower the product managers to do experiments based on their best judgment. At Asana today, this is actually like a milestone in our product development lifecycle. So this is right after like the PM writes the spec. They decide whether or not they should run an experiment to validate whether or not their hypothesis is true. So this is kind of like where they work. So here at Asana too, we have like an embedded data science team. They're actually responsible for helping run all the experiments. They work with the product manager to run the requirements, but the data science team is ultimately responsible for working with the engineering team to put the event logging in place, like create the experiment, do all the flags and all that stuff, and then work with engineering to get that done. So there's obviously more capacity for the product manager to do other stuff while the data scientists actually work on the experimentation themselves. Something to also note here is it's part of the product process, but we also empower product managers to not even go through the experiment. They don't have to run an experiment if they decide that they don't need to. And this flexibility allows them to do whatever they want and ship and experiment, and it gives them a clear framework. But at the same time, it doesn't like over process them if it's like not required or not necessary. It doesn't necessarily bring value to them for their development cycle. So that's just kind of how I like to think about it. I thought it works really well because it's a documented process that they can do. It's relatively lightweight and it's super defined, so anyone can follow it, even if there's like a new product manager that just joined the company. So that's just an example of how we do it at scale.
I appreciate the thought of the scale factor, Miguel, because you're familiar, in an early stage group, those resources aren't available. So
no.
From Dave's point of view, right, starting with the business objectives, and I'm actually going to call to Veronica's piece in the chat too of this idea validation while having an understanding of a holistic profitability. It doesn't matter who does it in this instance, it's you're aligned on why you do it and what's going to give you the most return. And that can be a product manager. It could be product operations stepping more into understanding the market and the customer and various ideas and supporting from that perspective. In Melissa Perry's product operations book, she speaks a lot on that data piece and bringing that in, which is not dissimilar from what Miguel has called out. It's just from a different perspective. So as long as the whys are understood, the hows and whens and all those things are very flexible, which is another reason I know I'm like pitching to the choir here of like product operations being a helpful thing is we're able to create that customization layer required for the business objective success because it's unique to a time, a company, a place, and its people.
Can I interject one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
To answer Claire's question, the way it works at Asana is for a program team, this is just like a basic product team. We have one embedded data scientist generally per like product team.
Nice.
Like program team, not like area or like feature or something like that.
Awesome. I am going to step away from the experimentation piece because I think we've lightly touched on some process optimization, different efficiencies, business alignment, etc. One thing that we've spoken but not said directly is the collaboration required in driving revenue with sales and marketing teams, as well as from customer feedback. So I'm going to pivot to that kind of GTM interlock pillar. How can product operations collaborate with sales and marketing teams to ensure product positioning, go-to-market strategies are aligned with revenue goals? I'm going to kick off with Miguel here.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. So I think this requires a continuous alignment through all steps of the product development lifecycle. We all know that GTM needs to be involved from the beginning of the road mapping process to share like our top customer concerns. And then once we set goals, GTM needs to be aligned with the numbers since they ultimately turn into sales goals or contribute to sales goals at the end. And also once we're developing the feature, GTM also needs to be in the loop when features are expected to be released, since they really know how the feature works, or because they need to know how the feature works and when they need to be released, when it needs to be released so they can talk to customers and start selling what that will look like. So One of the things I did at Rapid that was super, super useful for this was developing our release management playbook, which was at the time something that was not fully defined at the company. There were main issues associated with this, three that come to mind right now. And the first was PMs would often forgo like marketing campaigns just because these were smaller releases, and it was just something that was missed as part of the release process or launch process. We would also ship releases with a lot of P1 bugs, P2 bugs, which would result in a lot of incidents. And three, the sales team would oftentimes like demo unfinished features, which resulted in angry customers when we started to like demo them out. So this was like clearly an issue that, you know, we had identified, and we really needed to take we really needed to I guess address this to be able to satisfy the needs of our customers and help our GTM teams move more quickly on how we're releasing features. So my strategy for this was like threefold. The first thing was to increase visibility to our GTM teams by exposing like our release schedule. This is the first thing that we did. And essentially what this allowed was it allowed the GTM teams to be more proactive with respect to upcoming customer-facing feature releases versus reactive. It allowed us to set up all of our documentation, all of our marketing materials in advance of the release versus afterwards, and that really, really helped. The next step after that was kind of to audit our entire process and just delineate like roles and responsibilities. So before, different teams, different program teams have different ways of finishing documentation and submitting it to the product marketing team. So we basically standardized that whole process. And essentially, before we moved from release phase to release phase, we had a specific set of criteria that the product teams needed to check off basically with their stakeholder teams to be able to move forward to the next phase. So once we aligned that, the third thing that we did as a product operations team was once we had the processes and tools and dashboarding in place, we worked in an embedded capacity as basically release managers to help product managers release specific features. So the process in place, we were pretty much there as like the coaches or like the referees, just to make sure everyone was playing by the rules. And if they were confused, we would help unblock that. So that was just kind of like a strategy that we enacted, basically increasing visibility throughout the organization, then clarifying the roles and responsibilities of the organization. And after doing both of those, operationalizing as a product operations professional to help accelerate the team. So that's an example of how we were able to accelerate revenue growth by more closely connecting our R&D teams with our GTM teams.
Thanks, Miguel. Alex, Dave?
Yeah, I like this one a lot because I think spent a lot of time with myself and my team thinking about the teams in the revenue org or the sales org, what have you. At both GitHub and Eventbrite, I've approached this topic and found some success through sort of a review ceremony. I think Jeff in the chat, you mentioned this sort of launch coordination ceremony with GTM. Yeah, very similar sort of space of where we're finding, we're shipping things too broadly. It should have been beta instead of GA. We're sort of missing opportunities because a lot of features were sort of shipping any day of the week, and we could have bundled those together into kind of marketing moments, right? Put a blog post on top of it rather than just a series of change logs. And then there's sort of this lack of visibility leading to lack of support, sales readiness, right? So yeah, we established this sort of review ceremony. We've dubbed it like product launch review, and we get together with representatives from sales, support, marketing, and product to talk through, hey, here's the upcoming 30, 60 days worth of releases, what's changing, what's planned on the go-to-market front, and then we can have these conversations about, oh, well, if we change some of the dates here, or oh, are these key artifacts going to be ready in time so that we have that readiness? And it's just giving everybody a lot more confidence and visibility into what's coming and what's moving, so that we can sort of stay coordinated and ultimately like work toward those revenue goals, right? So that it's landing holistically. It's not just a feature launch.
I think it's really good, like listening to Miguel and Alex and reading Jeff, what Jeff wrote. It feels good to know that like we're doing the same things as everybody else. I think we're kind of following the script, if you will. We do a lot of the same things and really have in our product ops org, we have a launch team that takes products to market, and their job is to align features and products across the organization. And so as they gain, pardon me, gaining that visibility with the go-to-market team and moving them through. And then the other part of that is kind of what Alex said, where it's, hey, as we go 30, 60, 90 days out, we're giving that view is saying, hey, we thought this feature was going to, or this product that we were going to bring revenue in was going to hit in July. And now all of a sudden it's hitting in September instead. Or conversely in June. Like, what is the revenue impact of both of those things, and how does that kind of play then throughout the organization? There's obviously a domino effect on the bottom line that says, okay, if we miss this, it's a zero-sum game, right? If you miss this, where are you going to make it up? It's not just okay that you missed it, and so where do we find it? How do we make up for that? And so that alignment to me with that sales and marketing team is really just absolutely crucial. Every bit of alignment's crucial, but that part is really the kind of the first one on the priority list that I always on the box, the proverbial box that you check as you move through.
Good point.
I just have one more thing to add here. So something that Melissa Perry's book did really well is thinking about, or like, I guess, bucketing the types of deliverables that you send out to different teams. And the concept that she used was the GTM toolkit. And this revolves around like everything about how like release notes are managed, how to conduct product demos at the company, how to prepare documentation and marketing materials. And these ultimately end up being shipped to the GTM team to basically inform them about how the product works and when it's supposed to be launched. So I think like thinking about like, what does your specific org need with respect to this GTM toolkit is like one of the questions that you should be asking if this is a process you're standing up at your org.
Yeah. Just to cap us off here before we transition into Q&A, Jeff brings, the names of specific teams. PMM, I wrote down, that's a total key partner. I would also say sales enablement. That trio right there is a power team for sure as to how to do this really well. One thing I also want to highlight that I thought was on the edge of what Dave was describing is we have the business objectives and a product strategy as we've kind of talked about, right? And we have the pivot points and framework, but as a product ops person, you coach in both directions, up to your leaders and also to the product team. You have a very unique middle ground here. And to many mentions that Veronica had of have the people in the room that know the answer to these questions about revenue is a very key, important part. You are that in-between person that can help identify that person, feed them into your cadences, empower the product team to be that team, right? So bringing that element to it, the stage of the business and business strategy, you should be asking questions like, how do we look at churn? How are we planning? How are we looking at new business versus retention? Look at these number goals on the GTM org as well, so that when we look at the work balance that we were describing at the very beginning of like new features versus bugs and requests versus, product strategy, direction, and innovation, it should come from that core of business objective and retention goals and new business goals. Should translate pretty clearly. And if there's a discrepancy, you've got visibility into it and you can bring that up and make sure that those pivot points are available and the team is capable of pivoting. Awesome. Alyssa, I think we are ready for Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much to the whole panel. I love hearing what's happening at different companies and your specific experience. But what I think I loved even more from the session is that everybody that's listening and participating, they're tapping into what everybody else is doing, and they're feeling like maybe they're onto the same signal, right? So Dave said, like, we're following the same script. And that's really wonderful to hear that even for a community, a role, a function that is this young, we're all kind of figuring it out, in parallel. At this moment, I'd like to give, the rest of our participants today an opportunity to ask questions directly to the panelists by typing your questions into the chat. And while you're entering your questions, I just want to tell you guys about this one event that is happening next month that is designed specifically for product operations leaders. So Accelerate is a free virtual summit that's hosted by Dragonboat on July 23rd. And we'd love it if you could join us to hear how leading product organizations accelerate revenue through world-class product execution, and get exclusive access to powerful playbooks, like the ones you heard about today, used by executives at Google, Toyota, US Bank, and many others. So you can sign up today by scanning the QR code that's on the screen or going to dragonboat.io/accelerate. And Anna is going to share that link in the chat. Another quick word on Dragonboat, our sponsor. If you and your team are looking to operationalize your product operating model and potentially apply some of what you learned today, I encourage you to come check out the only platform that helps you do that. In order to see Dragonboat in action, sign up for a demo by scanning the code or accessing the URL that Anna is going to drop in the chat. All right. At this moment, let's look into the questions that we have coming in. So I'm going to take a look. If I read your name or I ask you to unmute yourself, please do so and ask the question directly to our panel, just so we, hear from you directly. All right, so let me just take a look.
I think it's just Miguel right now.
Miguel has a question. All right. Miguel, do you want to ask your question to the panel?
Yeah, so this is actually my question to the panel, and it related to something that I think Donald said. So he said that a real possible risk to short-term revenue focus can be customer dissatisfaction and churn. And as we all know, the software industry is going through some stuff, and I'm sure a lot of us are facing something kind of similar to this. Not necessarily my company, but maybe some other people, some other companies as well. So my question to you all is, how have you seen this in your prior experiences? And as a product operations professional, what strategies have you employed to address the short-term focus to like customer dissatisfaction and churn?
Oh man.
It's tough.
Yeah, I have if you don't mind me stepping in on this one. So I'll just be vulnerable. I have gone through my second layoff as of a couple weeks ago. So very much real as to how companies make decisions in the market that we're in, but it's also directly reflective of revenue success of companies, right? Where they need to cut costs and how they make those choices. The product team ultimately was decided to be one of those in this instance. I think part of our product operations job is to raise flags as they arise and we see them. And I think customer dissatisfaction is definitely one of them. I would put this directly related to the churn numbers, right? Get visibility into that. Any leader should have visibility into that so they can understand the direction in which the company is moving as it relates to new business numbers, right? If things are not, we could be driving towards a strategy of, and I'll give the example, pushing a new platform that is going to be, a market leader, and we really want to make a statement in the market. But at the same time, we're losing customers on our existing product, means that our balance to strike on maintaining our business as it is, which might not be the objective of the business, to be clear, but for people on the team, we should be flagging of, hey, something seems off here. Now, if the message that you're getting that the direction of the business wants to push forward and continue with that, you might not have the visibility in order to understand that call, but it's still important for you to bring attention to that. They're hard conversations to have, but as I mentioned before, that meaty middle exposure that you all have, you see how teams are delivering, you see what products are entering the market, you have kind of this like quarter out roadmap understanding of where things are going, that you can say, hey, what we're saying is not matching what we're doing. Is that just a misunderstanding on my part, or do we have a different discussion that needs to happen? It's not managing it directly, but it's, that's as much control as I think that you can really have. Dave, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I'd say the key time. We manage churn, churn is obviously like we try and predict it and make it part of the revenue plan, and then we manage it super close. So we have a I don't remember what it's called, like the churn board or the churn panel or whatever, where every month across every product we're diving into. I certainly don't want to say every loss, but a lot of them to go like, hey, where did they go? Why do we think they went? And then really breaking that down into like strategic pillars and say, okay, Is it value price? Is it feature availability? Is it like what are the core tenant? You know, there's 3 to 5 pillars that are core tenants of why customers leave, and then how do you take the feature set you're building to then to help close those gaps so that revenue problem, you know, and then for calendar year 25, how do we predict better our churn numbers so that we can close that revenue gap, and maybe that 30 million is being pushed down is really only 25 because we think we can shrink our churn numbers and push direction that way. We think of churn, two negatives, right? But churn loss we think of as true revenue gain.
Yeah, we had a monthly ER a couple of companies ago that was a product and customer success. We were on a retention focus, and that partnership with DS was really huge as well, because they're giving you how is the account representative looking at things, right? Because your buyer is different from a user. Product manager should have the perspective of both, but I feel in most cases there's a bias towards the user instead of the actual account itself. So to bring both of those perspectives in the room and then prioritize releases against those things are totally key. Yeah. Alex, anything to add here?
Yeah, for sure. There's quite a bit to unpack here. I've really seen it boil down to trust at the end of the day, customer trust. So one of the things I've found helpful over the years is kind of thinking through with those kind of cross-functional teams, especially those that are customer facing. What are some of those principles for what kind of erodes trust versus builds trust? And then really infusing those at various parts of the life cycle, establishing the sort of reactive measures, but also the sort of preventative or protective measures. So this could be incident, escalations to try to like save those. Is that working well? At GitHub, I introduced a public product roadmap as really like a trust building tool. This is just like a communication tool to help with transparency to build that trust. Hey, here's what's coming. Here's what we're investing in. Giving them the longer range view. During that launch review stage that I talked about, are we being careful to protect, again, using those principles? Are we going to release something that's going to hit payments or release something that's going to impact the customer's brand on our platform? And then that sort of responsiveness to feedback at the end of the day is, again, managing those expectations so that they don't feel like they're just yelling into a black box and giving us this valuable input on our products, but we're not responding to it at all. We're not taking it to heart.
Miguel mentioned early on the visibility that we bring, and I think that's a big key one of even if a salesperson has visibility into what's coming and they can translate that to a customer need, we've empowered the rest of the business to take that on, right? Rather than product just responding to a customer request, which can feel a little bit feature factory, right? It's like, how do you balance the individual needs versus empowering the rest of the group to help you with that and maintain direction holistically? There was a question in the chat, which is related. The hardest part is when C-team and board pivot from growth to retention and then start inventing product initiatives that now become crises. How do you maintain product leadership when company focus changes? That I think, I don't know about you guys, but my last 2 roles have felt very much like that. Very much I don't want to use the word top down, but not dissimilar to that, in which it's not shiny object. It's very much like we are in a mode where we need to change and we need to do this thing. And our executive team and the board does have the visibility to help make those choices. But what it does is take empowerment away from product managers in a way. There's balance to strike. I'm not going to answer the question. Alex, Dave, Miguel, what do you think of this question? How do you maintain product leadership when company focus changes?
I mean, I'll chime in again. I think it's really, this is, to me, is like one of the hardest things, but also one of the most valuable things that a product ops team can do. And it doesn't, whether it comes from the C level of the board or wherever it comes from, is maintaining that alignment and kind of like, I think we've all seen those hard pivots in the change in strategy. And how do you turn that into maybe a softer pivot, a level below you, so that it doesn't feel, so that change management piece feels a little bit better, and and kind of managing that focus across. Invariably, like whether you're managing churn or you're driving new product initiatives, the end result is kind of the same thing, right? And so to me, I go back to that framework that you mentioned, Lindsey, in the beginning. Like using the same strategy framework can work for both things. They may align slightly differently, and then the operating piece just adjusts slightly.
Miguel, Alex.
Yeah, I've seen this done well with where a product leader does a couple things, right? So one is maintain and sort of attention to and respect sort of trade-offs that need to be made. So not just adding more to the team. Oh, now we have to do these longer term bets, but also do these short-term retention type things. So being mindful of trade-offs, but then also tying into where, yes, we might be changing some of the short-term roadmap, but you know, a longer range strategy remains the same. We're still investing in parts of our portfolio in those longer range bets. So we're not just giving up everything. We're adjusting some parts, but still maintaining some bets in those longer range plays. And again, like tying back into that, we're still working toward the longer range strategy, even if the near quarter or two is going to be pivoting in one way.
My point of view here, and I'll just be really quick about it, is let's just say there's churn or something going on. It also helps to understand what the product strategy is. So like if there's churn, are we going to be targeting like our highest value customers? And maybe as product operations, after we clarify and define the product vision with our product management team, that's kind of like when we start to operationalize and set the tools and processes to do that. So for example, let's just say churn, and we want to focus on high value customers. This is kind of like as product operations, this is where we strategize on like how we establish like feedback channels with those high value customers, be it either like a research council for self-service customers or like a customer advisory board for enterprise customers, and then using that to target like our high value customer needs. I guess what I want to say is just like as product operations, I think the best lever we have is just like clarifying on the strategy and then enabling our product teams to actually execute that strategy. And a lot of the other stuff is like politics that we can help influence, but I haven't really, this is why I'm kind of asking the question, like I haven't really seen like a good strategy to do that in a product operations lens, which is why I'm asking everyone.
I think this really taps onto the people part, which is really difficult. I think it's the hardest part of our jobs. Dave's mentioned change management. Alex mentions you have to drop one thing to pick up another. I found those conversations to be really difficult, whether it's sunken cost or I don't agree with the direction or, you know, whatever those people elements are. I think you can still be driving the direction that the company wants to go, right? I don't think it's our choice to say these pivots don't make sense. We can bring the information up. But I think one thing that product operations absolutely can do is create avenues for voicing things, which is maybe a little bit of a gimme on the empowerment side, but product managers the reason product managers exist is because they are deep into that focus area. They have an understanding that an executive does not have the mental capacity to. Similarly, the executive has a business exposure that maybe the product manager doesn't have the mental capacity to think on. We're all limited in what we can actually take on. So to me, bringing those groups together and saying increasing that diversity of thought in forum and creating that space can be helpful for awareness and understanding about how these decisions are actually impacting a user, to a customer, to a business, to our revenue objective. It's a soft one, but I feel like communication channels are like where people become people and learn and understand what's actually truly going on and can make decisions.
All right, we are on time today. So I'm going to wrap up today's meeting by thanking everybody for joining us. Lindsey, thank you so much for your amazing questions and for guiding the conversation. The rest of our panelists, thank you guys so much for your clarity of thought and calling out the gray areas and asking your own questions. I love today's session. If you want to keep the discussion going, please don't forget to join our Slack community. Check the invitation link in the chat and hop on board. Share it with your teammates if you feel like these conversations are helpful and insightful for you. So thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next month. So take care and have a good day.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.